If you work for the Catholic Church and want to avoid burnout, overcome team dysfunctions, and put more souls in the pews, we're here to help. I'm Ty Hua, here with my co-host John Kahns, and we're providing leadership development for Catholic ministry professionals. Every week, you can expect engaging discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. Today, we're having a conversation with a real live Catholic ministry professional, Father Scott Traynor. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ty. Thanks, John. Great to be with you.
It is good to have you on here. I grew up watching some of your videos. You used to do kind of the Mike Schmidt thing for a little while there, didn't you? On YouTube with.
No, I never had a
videos?
YouTube channel, but I spent, I've been a priest for 23 years. A third of those, I was a director of campus ministries at a couple of our Newman centers. So I was on the Focus circuit. I was at Sikh conferences and that. So videos from those things float around from time to time.
That is what I'm thinking of. Absolutely. Well, it's great to have you on here. Really appreciate it. My wife actually, she was a convert to Catholicism and didn't grow up in the Catholic Church in Sioux Falls, but was just there for a few years and while she was doing some training for her job. But she did an away rotation in Yankton when you were there. And so when I said we had you on the podcast, she was like, "Oh, he's great. I cannot wait to listen to this one." So
nice.
no pressure, but the bar is high.
Tell her the $20 is in the mail. I really appreciate that.
I'll let her know. Absolutely. Well, just for the sake of our listeners, in case they don't know who you are, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself, your story? What does your ministry look like?
Thanks. I'm Father Scott Traynor. I'm a priest of the Diocese of Sioux Falls. Our diocese covers the east half of South Dakota from the Missouri River east. And I've been a priest for 23 years. I was ordained in the great Jubilee year of 2000. And I've spent roughly a third of my priesthood in campus ministry. I've spent a third of my priesthood in seminary formation as a formator and then as a rector of the seminary out in Denver. And a third of my priesthood in other parish assignments. So for 2/3 of those 23 years, I've been a pastor of different parishes along with those other things. And it's only my time as rector of the seminary and now in my current assignment as the vicar for Lay and Clergy Formation for the diocese that I've been out of parish ministry. So I have a canon law degree. I've also worked on our marriage tribunal. I do a lot of spiritual direction for going on 18 years now. We've hosted the 30-day spiritual exercises at our great retreat center in the Diocese of Sioux Falls Broomtree Retreat Center, which opened in 2005. And that was a very unexpected, but it's been an amazing part of my adventure in priesthood, just the work of spiritual direction, leading people on retreats, including the 30-day. I have a great love for the spiritual exercises. So also as part of my current assignment, I'm the executive director of Broomtree for the last 4 years.
Gotcha. So the vicar for Lay and Clergy Formation. What does that mean to you? I mean, that's not exactly like is that the elevator pitch?
Yeah, no. So I used to, so as many in your audience will be familiar, bishops have huge, crazy jobs, and they have vicars that sort of tee up some part or aspect of that job of the bishop for his leadership and decision and doing what he does. So, you have vicars for clergy, you have vicars, judicial vicars, you might have vicar for youth or vicar for Hispanics or whatever. So I'm the vicar for Lay and Clergy Formation. So in theory, whatever pertains to the formation of clergy or laity comes under my umbrellas of responsibility to tee those things up for our good Bishop Donald DeGrood. So practically, what does that mean? I lead a team in our chancery called the Discipleship and Evangelization Office. And our team is really responsible for all the outward-facing ministerial things you'd think of in a diocesan chancery office. So we are not IT, we are not HR, we are not the foundation, we're not the counseling center, but we're everything else. So adult formation, youth formation, Catholic schools, vocations, marriage, family, respect life, special needs, like all that kind of stuff falls under the umbrella of the Discipleship and Evangelization Office, which I head up.
Wonderful. Okay. So a big part of that, then, that formation, I assume, leadership training and leadership formation is a part of that. I know you guys went through this big restructure here. We had Dr. Chris Bergwald on a week or so ago
Oh,
to talk a little bit about it. But I'd love to hear from you just a little bit about this restructure that happened in the Sioux Falls Diocese, because I think there's just so many um, good things that people can take from and learn. Our listeners can kind of learn from the process, and just how you guys are seeking to follow through on that vision, that mission.
sure. So we are going through, like many dioceses, kind of a diocesan restructuring of our parishes. So and our process is called Set Ablaze. And previously, we had 114 parishes with 68 pastors. So the average assignment in our diocese was you're a pastor, single priest, who is the pastor, who is the priest in like 3 rural parishes that might be 20 or 30 miles apart. We've restructured ourselves into still 114 parishes, but grouped into 25 pastorates with 1 pastor, but a team of priests, 2 to 5 priests who are serving the parishes in that pastorate. And so that was the structural phase of Set Ablaze, which concluded with the assignments of priests according to that structure last July 1st. And then from July 1st till present and going on till May 1st, we're asking each pastorate to do some pastoral planning, like coming up with a strategic vision and a pastoral vision for how to advance our diocesan vision of building a culture of lifelong Catholic missionary discipleship through God's love in their local pastorate. So that's the short version of what we're doing in Set Ablaze.
Yeah. So do you have, I guess the question I would have, kind of as a follow-up, they're coming up with a strategic pastoral plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys use kind of a framework, or how they identify like next steps, or how they're approaching that decision? Because when I think about that, there's like decision soup in front of them.
It is
You've got
decision
now
soup, yeah.
4 or 5, 6 parishes. I don't know how many parishes grouped together. We got a handful of priests. We've got these different teams and staffs. What has kind of been your guidance or encouragement for them to approach this, what seems like a huge task?
Yeah, so we invented a handbook for
Okay.
to guide each pastorate in their process. And
Mhm.
I actually just want to back up a step, because Set Ablaze is a response to a very clear diocesan vision that came as a grace to our bishop's heart shortly after he was ordained Bishop of Sioux Falls in 2020. So in 2020, Father Don DeGrood became Bishop of Sioux Falls. The next day, he turned 55 years old. And becoming bishop, I'm sure, was, as he said many times, the last thing on earth that he had in his mind or imagination. So when he got the call from the nuncio, he went into his chapel and prayed. And he really heard God say, I want you to say yes, and I'll provide you with whatever you need. And so as he became bishop, and he started thinking, and he's reading, Gallup research and Pew research about all the statistics of decline in the church, in whatever metric you want to look at: mass attendance, marriages in the church, baptism, whatever it is. It's not, generally speaking, good news. And so he was really praying. He's like, God, you said you're going to provide me and the diocese with whatever we need. So what do you have prepared for us, so that in 20 years, like he's going to be bishop for 20 years, our diocese isn't just managing decline, so we're declining slightly less severely than our neighbors, but that in fact, in 20 years, we are booming and flourishing. And it was out of that context that he really received a particular inspiration that to focus the energies of our diocese on building a culture of lifelong Catholic missionary discipleship through God's love. And in the middle of that, again, for many of your listeners will be familiar, missionary discipleship is a hot term these days, like the new evangelization has been for many years prior to that. And so, like, what does that mean? So one of the things that we're doing differently in our diocese than I know a lot of my friends are around the country is we're not trying to come up with like, what is the plan for building missionary discipleship, and then trying to get all our parishes to do that. Rather, that vision statement is like a North Star, and it's not a theme for the year. It's not like a motto for a 3-year campaign. It is what God has inspired our bishop to lead our diocese to for, the next 20 years. And we're very intentional about how can we organize the structures, resources, gifts that God has raised up in our diocese to build that culture. set ablaze, I think would have been a total disaster without the couple years of groundwork of making that vision known and helping people understand in particular what that means, because it would just be all over the place. Or we'd have to resort to, hey, here's one solution. We want to try to get every parish to do that. But the reality is, look, you take any of these parishes or any of these now groupings of parishes, these pastorates, they have a totally different history. They have a totally different set of needs and opportunities. They have a totally different set of gifts and resources that are present today to respond to that vision. So in our process, we are encouraging and urging people to undertake a kind of evangelical entrepreneurialism. Be innovative. Try new things. We need to disrupt these trends of decline by focusing our energies on building this culture of lifelong Catholic missionary discipleship through God's love. How is God inviting you to do that in your pastorate? So it was in light of those convictions and that kind of groundwork that we came to the current planning process. And the handbook just sort of walks through a simple, I should say, it is simple. It's not necessarily easy, but it's simple outline of, number one, let's take stock of our current reality. So we've looked at these 4 pillars plus one, namely worship, discipleship and evangelization, community and service, and then Catholic schools, if for the pastorates that have a Catholic school in them. And those first 4 actually came from some writing of Pope Benedict, who basically says, hey, these are the things that the church does in every place, in every time. We worship God. We are called in the Great Commission to evangelize. We do so as a community of faith, and we give witness to the gospel through our service to one another and to the broader community. So in each of those pillars, the simple process is, hey, what is your current situation? So what's going well? What are you grateful for? What are the particular gifts like in your history up to this very moment that God has raised up in your pastorate in each of those areas? Number one. Number two, given where you are, where would you like to be in the future? And I mean, aim big. What would be an aspirational goal? What would you like to be able to say is true of the communities in your pastorate in the future? That is a very aspirational goal. So for example, in our diocese, way back in 1996, when Bishop Carlson became the bishop of our diocese, and we were just starting our diocesan foundation, which is an amazing organization. One of their aspirational goals was, can we drought-proof our diocese? You know? And that was just a North Star for the future, but it helps to say, like, hey, when there's a million good things we could be doing, which of these will be most effective right now to move towards that goal? It's not like, hey, how in the next 25 years are we going to raise $240 million? That's not the point with all the steps figured out, because that's crazy. That doesn't work out. But just say that's what we want to shoot for. And when opportunities or ideas come to us, we want to measure it by, does it move us to that aspirational goal? So we're inviting each pastorate to, through a large consultation process, like sift through and discern what would be a good aspirational goal for us to shoot for. And again, we're going to have 25 different answers for that from the perspective of each of those categories in the different pastorates. And that is awesome. We want that local, innovative, entrepreneurial spirit. We want laboratories of missionary discipleship all over our diocese. And then, so where are we? Where would we like to be in the future? And then just very simply, what's one step we want to take in the next year that will be a focused, intentional effort to move in that direction towards our aspirational goal? And lastly, how will we know if we're succeeding? If that thing that we're trying for this next year, if it's moving the needle the way we hope it will. So a simple metric. And so that's the structure for each of those 5 pillars. And that's what the kind of outline of each pastorate's proposal back to Bishop for his approval on May 1st will look like. There you go.
No, that is awesome. I think our listeners that have been with us from the beginning, it's kind of, I think it would ring in the back of their memory of these things that John and I have been talking about. You know, when you mentioned laying out the groundwork of, preparing for this and not just trying to implement it right away. There was groundwork that was laid beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about this on the podcast all the time of tell the people where you're going to go before you do it, right?
Yeah.
Don't just implement it. That's huge. So as you're working with these pastorates, what have you seen so far? Are they coming up with these good ideas yet, or is it just kind of wait and hope and it's coming, or we hope it's coming? What have you seen so far, Father?
So yeah, you're right on, Ty. So first of all, like even in the structural model, which was the first half of Set Ablaze, we talked about why is this needed and what are we hoping to accomplish about it and what are we going to do. And then there were, I would say, endless rounds of consultation, kind of these concentric circles of consultation from, the consultors to the priest council to all the clergy to, parish catechetical leaders and key leaders around the diocese, diocesan pastoral council, like that, including a phase of like 4 months where the whole draft of the proposal was open to anyone who went to our website from across the diocese for comment of how could we make these structural connections better. And that whole process, first of all, every round of consultation ended up making real and substantive changes to whatever draft we were working with. And they were great improvements. So that was happening. And just by the fact that you're putting things in front of bigger and bigger groups of people and saying, hey, this is what's happening. It was great communication and over communication of this is what we're doing and why. And we'd catch people up. We've been talking about this for 8 months and someone's hearing about it for the first time because they're asked to chime in on wherever we're at in those drafts. And I think the level of buy-in and commitment and like, hey, I'll lend the gifts that I can lend to this process in whatever my role is, really, really helps. So just to underline and affirm that. In terms of how the pastorates are doing, we had each pastorate create a planning committee, and then we urged them to do really broad consultation across their communities with surveys and town hall meetings and other ways of just saying, hey, these are the questions we're trying to come up with aspirational goals. What is God raising up in your heart? Hey, if we're zeroing in on, we want to shoot for this to say this is true about our worship as a community. What would be a good first step for us to take? And our experience is really different from pastorates. And some pastorates have amazing aspirational goals and are really having a more difficult time. Like, okay, what would be a first step? Others are like very pragmatic. South Dakota rural people are a practical people. And they have like, well, we know we want to do this, this, and this, but how that would roll up towards an aspirational goal, they have a harder time to identify. But taking whatever has been coming forward in the process and just with a little encouragement, they're able to fill in the gap on whatever side has been more difficult for them. So we are very intentional. We've been doing kind of these round robin meetings with some diocesan leadership with the individual pastors and their teams to say, hey, where are you at? How can we help? If you're stuck or if you have questions, ask early, ask often. We want to serve you to help get unstuck. And it is beautiful to see, as we are a couple months from those proposals coming back to Bishop, what God has been raising up. And I keep saying that, and I should underline that too. Set Ablaze for our diocese is a moment in a series of amazing providential graces. So I talked about Bishop and the vision he was given when he first got here. So we want to create this culture. Great. We need to find a baseline. Where are we at with missionary discipleship? Let's find out. How do we find out? Right at that time, the Vatican called for the worldwide synod on synodality. Like, hey, we want you to have a bunch of intentional conversations in your diocese focusing around mission engagement. We're like, okay, because that's what we needed to do. So we were able to tailor that diocesan part of our contribution to the worldwide synod, asking questions that really helped us understand where we are foundationally for moving forward in this vision. The main feedback, we had thousands of people that responded to our surveys and in town hall meetings. It was a great process. But the thing that stood out heads and shoulders above anything else of the data we received back was the number one passion, desire, and like, we need to move on this. Like 80% of everyone that was engaged in that is, we got to get people back to Mass. And then the second response was, we have no idea how to do that. Okay. So that's great. Okay. That's a great focus. Like, this is a first important step that people are ready for in building this culture over a long period of time. So we start rolling on that. Then what happens? The bishops of the United States call for a national Eucharistic revival. Hey, we want to spend 3 years really holding up the great gift of the Holy Eucharist and creating a movement of people who are, healed, converted, formed, and united by an encounter with Jesus Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. Yes, thank you, bishops of the United States. Perfect thing at the perfect time, right? I missed a step back there after the vision. You, Mary, put out that great book, From Christendom to Apostolic Mission, which gave, and we did a big diocesan book study on this. We had 5,000 people go through book studies in that in small groups, just to understand the whole cultural and historical context, why the vision, a focused, intentional, and sustained effort is necessary in our culture today to swim upstream against a secular and rapidly secularizing culture. So that belief that God is on the move, these things are unfolding in perfect providential timing, we're really trying to instill in our pastorates. So if they get stuck like, oh, this is a hard project, how are we going to get through it? Just to stop back and say, look, God wants this to happen. He knows your circumstances. He knows your resources and abilities, your needs and your opportunities. He knows the people he's prepared their hearts to raise up. Like, pray into that, look for signs of that providence for God to orchestrate your response in this planning process. And the more people lean into that, amazing things are happening.
It sounds almost like with the Holy Spirit moving the Pope to do the Synod on Synodality in the USCCB, that maybe God's doing all the heavy lifting and you guys are just kind of watching it happen. Would you say that's
Yes. Let God do the heavy lifting. If I had a dollar for every time I tell people that, my retirement would be set.
I love that so much. And I imagine there's just so many moments in that too, as they're looking at their strategic pastoral plan, trying to incorporate the lay faithful into that conversation as well. There are so many good moments for real catechesis, particularly in the role that they play in the church, their discernment of the charisms that God gives them, and how that plugs directly into their community, their parish, how God is actively using them. And it's even connected to, for you guys, it's even connected to the broader church, like a really direct connect, which is life-changing. Especially, I grew up in a rural parish too, a really small town. You say this, you saw the same 100 people maybe on the weekend, but aside from that, you didn't know the church was much bigger. But to have this big connection where you're having this broad conversation across the diocese, and it even connects to what God's doing in the nation with the Eucharistic revival, it's connecting to the worldwide church in the synod and synodality. I think that is just beautiful. I'm curious if there have been, just as one of our big hearts is to speak into areas of frustration directly, so that we can work through frustration, so that we can, the devil can't play with it in the dark. Have you seen or heard much as far as like the laity or the people working in the churches, where the frustrations kind of manifest themselves through this rollout in terms of bringing teams together? Because we know a lot of parishes that they are getting merged. So how those frustrations play themselves out, and kind of how you address those, trying to encourage them to forge a new pathway together to pursue this vision together.
Yeah, it's really true. So a few things I could say about that. First of all, I think the more that we've been trying to tell this story and help people see those movements of providence, that what they're being asked to do in their very local area really is connected to the broader reality of the diocese and what's going on in the church, in the nation, and in fact in the world, helps them to be motivated. Like, oh, God really is doing something there. So that helps disarm my fear, right? This is a huge change. It's a huge change for our clergy. It's a huge change for the 25 priests who are now pastors. There are a bunch of people who have been pastors forever who are no longer pastors. And of course, it's a huge change for the lay people in the pews, to ask them to think like, it's not just, hey, how do we keep our church going in, with our 80 families that we've been, tending to with such generosity for how many generations? But, now we're going to be together with these other 5 communities in a common mission field. Like, that's just a new idea. And with big change, of course, comes a lot of fear and apprehension. And one of the things a couple things I would say that have helped. Number one, in our pastoral planning, we are not talking anything about, hey, what parishes need to close, right? We started with 114 parishes in the structural restructuring. We still have 114 parishes. It's just the way that they're being staffed. And this call to a united mission field within that pastorate is the main thing. So that disarms a bunch of, I would say, the fear in the first place. Second thing is, as Pat Lencioni is fond, we're big Pat Lencioni fans around here in our diocese. Communicate, and over-communicate. Create clarity, communicate clarity, over-communicate clarity. And man, have we learned this over and over again throughout this process. Like things where from our perspective, we're who are working on this day in and day out, trying to coordinate and plan and move forward. Like we're like, oh, we've said this a million times. But when we start to see like, oh, there's someone or a group of people who are just kind of struggling, they're on the struggle bus out there, almost always it's just like despite everyone's best efforts, they just haven't heard the whole story. And the goodwill of people when they understand what we're doing and the reasons behind it, and what we're not doing. So like rumors, in that vacuum, if they haven't received the real communication of what's really happening, the fears stir rumors, and rumors reinforce fears, and that's where difficulty has been found. So when we see that, just to say like, you know what, I bet there's an opportunity just engage those people with their concerns. Let's listen to them. Let's understand the question behind the question and see. And what we often find is actually what's really driving their resistance is actually easily pivoted into like, oh, well, this is what I really hope for my community. And that can be positively contributed to the process we're in the middle of. But they didn't understand that connection. And when that switch happens, it's a beautiful thing when resistance is turned into like, oh, enthusiasm for what we're doing, because I understand how the concerns that are in my heart and mind actually fit into what's happening. So all of that is made possible because there is a sincere commitment to not a top-down thing, but like, this is the direction we want to go. We trust and believe God is at work in the hearts and minds of the people in your community to respond to that vision. And that's why we want to take your concerns or questions, even if they're expressed with anger or resistance, like let's listen to that and see what's going on there. And time and again, we've just seen that switch flip from concern or resistance or fear to like, oh, this is great. I can actually move forward in this desire that's really important in my heart.
Yeah, that's great. I've been a part of this parish that I'm in. It's the St. Therese parish.
Yeah.
And so I think it's been about 3 years because I actually started attending when I was dating my then girlfriend, now wife. And there are a lot of times where communication just falls through the cracks. And, I remember one of the parish members coming up to me when this set ablaze was all happening and the restructure was happening. And they're like, I'm going to Brandon, South Dakota. I'm going to go to the church there. And I'm like, why? You live like 2 blocks away from this parish. Well, they're changing too much. And I go, is that a bad thing?
Mm.
And he was just kind of like dumbfounded that I wouldn't like take up the charge with him and then leave Brandon. I'm just like, dude, I just got here. Like, I'm not leaving. I'm not mad about it. Like,
Yeah.
If anything, what my recommendation is to talk to the church and ask what's going on. If
Yep.
you don't understand, if you're frustrated, if you are feeling like you're being left out or left behind,
Mhm.
well, you need to go talk to somebody. Deacon Thane, awesome guy.
Yes.
Father King, Father Cowles, Father Jerry, awesome guys. Just talk to them and clear up that confusion. Like you said, rumors reinforce fear.
Mhm.
So just go and talk to them. Now, there are other things that I would probably suggest for other parishes is just having that outreach. Just like any evangelization, if you don't have that personal connection with the person, they don't hear what you're trying to do or build or what vision you have. And I'm not talking just the younger people, it's the old people,
Yeah.
the blue hairs that are like, well, I've been doing this for 60 years. I'm not doing anything. Typically we mention her name as Ethel on this podcast. But that's typically what happens. But I understand, we are also Pat Lencioni fans. And the communication is so important. But I think beyond communication is that personal connection
Yep.
with that parish member or whoever you're working with.
Yeah. Pat, when he talks about the 5 dysfunctions of the team and the 5 habits of a healthy organization, that foundational pillar is trust. And it's vulnerability-based trust, not which means like, hey, we can just be honest with each other and it's safe to bring out my fears or failings or concerns in related to whatever we're trying to get done. And that trust only really is built through, like you're saying, that personal connection. So that's a challenge because that trust is necessary for people to be free to enter into healthy ideological conflict where they can bring their ideas to the table. And there is, that's been a real emphasis in our whole process is how many different outlets can we give for people to know that they've been heard, what they've contributed has been listened to and looked at and considered. And even if it isn't the thing that happens, that really helps people to commit to the endeavor. But that really does begin in that building that trust and nothing like personal encounter and relationship to lay that foundation for sure.
Sure. And not to throw a wrench into this next question, I'm going to ask it from 2 different views. So the set ablaze, where do you see it being done really well? So the set ablaze, but then even further, just ministry in general, where are you seeing ministry being done really well?
Yeah, I've been amazed. I would have thought, so when we started Set Ablaze and we were looking at the complexity of the pastorates, the number of just people and things that are being managed in a thing of that size, each pastorate now is of the size and complexity of what would have been our 2 largest parishes previously, right? And if you think about the priests in our diocese, like, oh, if we needed a new pastor in one of those 2 parishes, what's the list of guys you'd just be like, oh yeah, we can send them there? It's not 25 guys. Okay. And so I was accused of being a great pessimist about that at the beginning, but it's true. And but that being said, again, I am totally amazed of that every pastorate, like I said, we've been doing these one-on-one meetings with the pastors kind of throughout the process of their planning this year. Every pastorate is doing something that's amazing. Okay. And one of the big things that we've tried to communicate and over communicate is like, hey, pray about this, see where God is leading you, be courageous to aim big because you have the freedom to fail. Like this isn't going to be a one thing, we're going to do this thing now and we're on autopilot for 10 years. No, we're kickstarting and laying the foundation of a habit that's going to be, reiterated each year. So, in Silicon Valley, one of the mantras is fail fast, right? We're going to try a new thing and see if it works. What do we learn from that? And even if it fails, there's something to learn and readjust, and we'll benefit on the basis of what were considered failures. So that's been a huge obstacle to get people into that mindset, like the freedom to fail. If we try something that's a little outside the box, or we do, and we all have to do something different because doing what we're doing is resulting in, decades sustained trends of decline and actually now accelerating decline. So feel free to fail as people enter into that. But I've just been amazed, despite my expectations of like, there are flashes of genius in different aspects of those pillars in every pastorate in our program. And they're not all going to be home runs. And we told them, like, we don't need a home run in each of these 5 categories. Even if you're to use a baseball analogy, even if it's just a long at bat and you end up striking out, but you saw all the pitches, that's a win. So our mantra is we want to do something that is focused and intentional. And then we're going to sustain being focused and intentional over time with these iterations of kind of these, what are we going to try this year to advance towards our aspirational goal. So just kind of downloading that mindset. Everyone is doing well in some regard of that. So I've just been delighted in that. I was thinking about this question, where do I see ministry doing well? Actually, I'd point to our diocesan counseling center. It used to be known as Catholic Family Services. It's been rebranded under its new executive director, Emily Leadham, as the Lourdes Center. And the transformation of that, what's always been a great service in our diocese, to really be on point for the vision of our diocese, really recognizing what's the present need and undertaking some pretty significant restructuring of that whole apostolate to really meet those needs in a very focused and fruitful way and an innovative way has been amazing. So I have a lot of admiration for Emily Leadham, who used to be our marriage, family, and respect life director, got an advanced degree in counseling from Divine Mercy University, and is now the executive director of that Lourdes Center. Her leadership and the way that she's taking her staff really with a strengths-based mindset, what are the gifts that God has given us, looking at the real need instead of just like, how do we keep doing what we're doing? What are the real needs out there and how can we best address those needs? That ministry has flourished, and it's just been a marvel to behold over the last 3.5 years.
Yeah, we're big fans of Emily Leadham on this podcast, so we're not at all surprised to hear such glowing remarks.
if someone in the world doesn't like Emily Leadham, the problem is theirs.
That's a them thing. Yeah,
that's a them thing.
It's really hard not to like her. Yeah. Like just being around her infectious joyfulness it's different. So she's got the right personality for that role, and she just does a really good job. She just really, really cares, and she's got that servant's heart. So yeah,
absolutely. Well, Father Scott, we've got this one question we always like to throw out to all of our guests. If you had the attention of the whole world for 90 seconds, what would you say?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no pressure. No pressure. The whole world's listening.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm picturing the whole world, but actually I want to address this to each and every person. And that you'll hear, if people are fans of the spiritual exercises, they'll hear a lot of this coming through. But the first thing I would say is that, listen, each one of you are capable of living in intimate and unceasing union with God. You are made for an all-encompassing relationship with God. You're capable of that. That's real. God created you for exactly that, to live in intimate and unceasing union with him because he loves you. Number two, that you are a unique and unrepeatable masterpiece of God's love in the world. And no one can be in relationship with God the way that you're capable of, because you are a unique and unrepeatable masterpiece, gift of his love in the world. So when Jesus prays at the Last Supper, Father, they are your gift to me, Jesus looks at you and says, Father, she is your gift to me. He is your gift to me. And thirdly, and as a consequence of those first two, that, all the things that have ever motivated you, inspired you, got your fires burning, made you feel alive, those things are gifts from God in your life, and their fulfillment is in God. And until we allow God to pursue us so that our hearts are resting in him alone, we will always have that restlessness. But if you feel that restlessness or something like, life isn't just quite what I hope for, pay attention to the things that really do bring you alive and recognize they are essentially connected to God and they're gifts of God in your life to bring you to that fullness of intimacy and union with him. So if I had 90, I think that was 90 seconds. I would say those three things.
We'll allow it.
Preach.
Yeah, we'll allow it. So I've got just, when you mention spiritual direction, and like you said, as you're listening to that 90-second, I like to call it like my soapbox when I step up there. Where would somebody go to find spiritual direction? This is a selfish question that isn't on the email that we sent you, but like spiritual direction wise, where would you recommend somebody to go find a good spiritual director?
Yeah. I would take actually a step back from that question and say, why is the person seeking spiritual direction? So it's never been the case in the history of the church that everyone has a spiritual director, and it will never be the case. I have a firm conviction about kind of a triage of who needs spiritual direction more. Like if a person's trying to discern their vocation, if they're going through a major change in life, if they're involved in ministry, part-time or full-time, volunteer or paid. And fourthly, if they have a specific desire to grow in relationship with God, and that desire is not moving forward despite them committing and prioritizing these things, which are the ordinary ways that we all become saints, which are frequenting the sacraments, steady diet of the Word of God, seeking out and prioritizing good fellowship, like friendships, whatever time I have for friendship with other people who are seeking the Lord, and service. I missed one. Prayer, sacraments, frequent the sacraments. Oh, personal prayer. And then, daily personal prayer. So prayer, frequent reception of the sacraments, service, fellowship, and a steady diet of the Word of God. If someone's really prioritizing those things in their life and they still have an unmet particular desire to grow in relationship with God, that would be another good clue that they're going to benefit from good spiritual direction. So my first thing is to point people to those priorities and see what happens. And within that, I would say, and do you go to a regular confessor? That's kind of the ordinary thing that when people think of, oh, I'd like spiritual direction today, how that desire has been met for the last, 2,000 years of church history. So that's what I'd say, first of all. Second of all, different dioceses do it differently. The way we've solved this need in our diocese, or this inquiry in our diocese, is that we maintain a list from our clergy of people they know who are trained and effective as spiritual directors in their area, whether they're lay people or clergy, but people who've been trained and are known and effective and who are willing to meet with people. Those three things. And we just update that list, but we don't publish that list. And the idea is the diocese is not in a position to put the stamp of approval, like, oh yeah, I'd recommend this person. That'd be impossible to manage. But when parish catechetical leaders or clergy in our parishes receive this inquiry from people, they can go and look at that list and see if there's anyone available and pass on those names. And if the person turns out to be a disaster, the director, we can blame the person who recommended them. So,
yeah.
That's what we do. It is true that more and more people are being trained. There's a lot of great spiritual director training programs. I teach at one for priests from the Institute for Priestly Formation. They do a 3-year program it's based out of Chicago each year at Mundelein Seminary. And each year we have 160 priests who are, or every 3 years, a cohort of 160 priests from around the United States that are being trained in spiritual direction through that program. So it's becoming a resource that's more and more available. Depending on where people are listening, different dioceses have different ways of a list they keep or a page where they can give references or recommendations.
Yep. And I guess where my question was leading to there is, with our podcast, we talk about, overcoming team dysfunctions, avoiding burnout. And without fail, every time that we give these actionable steps, the first thing we always say is have a good prayer life.
Amen.
And so if they're not doing that, and then they're turning around and trying to be good catechists or DREs or whatever, and they themselves aren't doing it, there's something missing, and that's where burnout happens. So if we could help our ministry professionals to understand the importance of spiritual direction and being connected to the source, who is Jesus Christ himself, right? Like you said, frequenting the sacraments. What more important step to be able to help others than to help yourself?
Amen. Yeah. And in our diocese, we have a great gift. It's a passion of mine to teach people how to pray. So we have the School of Missionary Discipleship, and year one of that thing is teaching people how to pray and a little bit about discernment of spirits, because we had one of our pastorates, their planning committee, they're really passionate about the discipleship and evangelization pillar. And they're like, yeah, our whether we went to a Catholic school or parish CCD, it wasn't good enough. It was inadequate. And we've had to, make up for that in adult life. So they're really passionate about making their religious education in the school and in the parishes better and more impactful. And so the pastor just asked this question, well, what was missing? What was missing for you? What would you suggest? And 100% of them was all we were never taught how to pray. We were taught prayers to say, but we weren't taught how to pray as a relationship. So we do a great, every year, we do a cohort of the first year of School of Missionary Discipleship. It's a 12-week program to learn the interior dynamics of relational prayer. And people shouldn't feel sheepish that they're like, I don't really know what that means or what that looks like, because none of us were taught. We weren't, and you might have an evangelical friend in your life who's like, oh yeah, I have a personal relationship with Jesus. And you're like, I don't even know what that means. This can really help people get into those waters. And it's a great, great benefit.
Awesome. So moving on, who do you think we should have on next?
I bet everyone I'm going to name, you've already had. So, John, are you buddies with Jim Beckman?
I don't know him personally, but I know a lot about him.
Have you had him on?
We haven't. No, but
100%. Get Jim Beckman on there. Yeah. Yep. He's been, a national leader in youth ministry and then diocesan leadership circles for, 3 decades. He's just he has a great vision of how to lead and how to form leaders. So if you haven't had him on, that would be my number one recommendation.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Well, Father Scott, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for being on the podcast. Is there anywhere you'd like that our listeners can go to connect with you or support your ministry?
I guess 2 things. One, if people are interested more in our Set Ablaze process, if they're looking for ideas and what that's like, it's all available on setablazesf.org. Setablaze. I'm sorry. Yeah. If you just go to sfcatholic.org, our diocesan website, you can find all things Set Ablaze, what we did in our planning process, the handbook, all the things, if that's a good resource for people. And then to what you were just mentioning a moment ago, if someone really is looking for a good getaway, a time of retreat to deepen their relationship with God, which we all need on a regular basis, please check out broom-tree.org. That's our great retreat center. Amazing offerings for retreat opportunities for men's and women's weekends and individually directed retreats. So broom-tree.org. Check it out. Tell your friends.
All right. Father Scott, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks.
And thank you, dear listeners, for listening to the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast. If you want to transform your parish through your work, but you're not sure where to start, you can download our free parish health assessment at catholicministryprofessionals.com/free assessment. It's just 36 questions. It only takes about 5 minutes. And afterward, you will have a color-coded picture of your parish's health that you can use to fuel better conversations, prioritize better work, and become a better leader. And of course, you can always email us at catholicmenpros@gmail.com to share feedback. And last but not least, don't forget to text this episode to a priest or a friend of ministry that can benefit from it.
And with that, we'll see you in the vineyard.